long-range artillery, they finally gave up and said, "Oh, as in good faith, we leave this to Ukraine now."
Yes, we believe
There
it was
is,
all in good faith and
Well,
nothing to do with their failure.
maybe they achieved their mission of removing all the Nazis from Snake Island, and then there's no need to hang around anymore.
Or cynically, maybe they want to drop a tactical nuke in that area, and therefore they want their people out of there. That's the worst case.
Or
Yeah,
they, their soldiers were so hungry they couldn't feed them at all, so they had to remove them.
funny. Okay, other.
Wait, I have one more. I have one non-tech news.
Okay,
Biden just submitted, I think was it a proposal? He calls on Congress to ease Senate rules to codify Roe v. Wade. This was something Manchin first mentioned,
And
but now, I'm sorry.
to end
He
the filibuster, just for that, folks.
Yeah, he would support suspending the Senate filibuster rule to codify the constitutional right to an abortion, according to Roe, which is interesting because the rule we have now isn't actually the Roe ruling, right? We've got Casey is really the precedent. We just talk about Roe, but he's got bipartisan support, but this is always a dangerous thing when anybody says things like pack the court or suspend the filibuster, because remember, when that sounds like it works in your favor, it sounds like, yay, let's do that. But remember, it can always be used against you. Once it's in there, right? So if the court gets, packed, which is something that Biden doesn't support, so I don't think it's going to happen, which I think is a good thing. But I think the suspending the filibuster is a terrible idea. May happen because there's enough people that do not like it, that they'd like to be able to get rid of it. But unfortunately, it's one of the few tools that we have in order to have minority members actually have an impact on lawmaking.
check this out. I just retweeted a tweet that was tweeted 1 minute ago, literally 1 minute ago, from China's official spokesperson. And his response, as you can see in the tweet that I just retweeted at the Tech News Twitter account, TNATW, the tweet says, "It is NATO that poses systemic challenges. NATO has the blood of many innocent civilians on its hands." And
NATO released its 2022 strategic concept.
so there's a video of a press event that China just gave where a journalist asks, or the journalist raises the issue where that NATO just met and NATO just said this, and they gave the response, and then they just tweeted the response as I was discussing the issue. They just tweeted about it. So it's very current happenings going on here, and an interesting response that China, characteristically, as expected, doesn't say, "Sorry to hear you feel that way. Let's meet, in somewhere neutral to discuss it and get on good footing and whatnot." No, no, not at all. The response is, "No, we're not the bad guy. You're the bad guy." So that's
Did
the
I
latest.
not say that?
Yeah, it's just classic.
In Madrid, mentioning China for the first time. It claimed that China challenges NATO's interests, security, and values, and criticized China's normal defense building, economic policies, technological progress, among other aspects. It also said that NATO remains open to constructive engagement with China.
Right, so that's the journalist in China asking the minister, and even mentions that in that last sentence that NATO still has the door open and is willing to discuss any potential misunderstandings. No, they're not. There's no misunderstandings. You're the bad guy. We're not the bad guy. That's the only misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding here is that we're not the bad person. You're the bad person. So, oh boy, this is not going to end well. Okay, well that's a little up to the minute update.
One more is that Ketanji Brown Jackson officially became a Supreme Court justice. Breyer stepped down to make it happen. Yay! We should all be really happy. She's very smart. She was a bipartisan supported justice. I mean, it's a huge move. I think it's great. I think it's a great step, and this is something that I think people criticized Ruth Bader Ginsburg for not doing. She clung on to the seat too long, and unfortunately, what ended up happening is it gave a lot more possibility to Trump to fill a seat with someone who is ideologically extremely right, which is what happened now. But this is amazing. She's an amazing, amazing person. Doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you are on. She's brilliant, and hooray!
Okay,
Need
so
more women on the court. And they also ruled, the Supreme Court also ruled against the EPA putting limits and restrictions on carbon from the factories, which is a big deal a big bad deal for the environment. I put it in the back channel.
okay, so
And
since
they also ruled just now that Biden could end Trump's remain in Mexico policy.
okay, so since in the last 2 minutes since that headline was shared, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, China's foreign ministry, has tweeted 3 times. Get a load of these tweets. These are fantastic. I mentioned the one from what is now 3 minutes ago, that NATO is the threat to the world order, and since then there's been 3 new ones. Women's right. Here it is. I just retweeted it. Women's rights are part and parcel of basic human rights. This is China lecturing the world on human rights, by the way, where women were given forced abortions during the one-child policy. China's had many years of one-child policy. If you dared to have more than one, you were forced by the state to have an abortion. They killed your baby in your womb, and they're giving lectures on women's rights.
Gaslighting didn't start in the United States.
Women's rights are part and parcel of basic human rights. Gender-based discrimination against women is undeniably a human rights malaise that has long existed in the U.S. Oh boy, this is getting rich. Of
But
Yeah.
I
China.
mean, that's consistent. They're pro-abortion, so
No, no,
or
no, no, no,
pro.
no. You need to read all the China, modern history during the Mao Zedong's, that period, because they want more population. They in the beginning they abandoned the abortion. No. They support, they banned abortion because they want more people. And then after they found the population grew too fast, so they just allowed one kid. We all know it's one kid policy. So many women were forced to abort their babies because people want boys. Because in China, traditionally, boy can only boy can be the legacy. I mean, to continue the blood. Then right now, because the the birth rate is drastically decreasing again. So they now using some other method to stop women to abort their baby again. So it's never about women's right. You need to read the context of policy, of the politics, or the strength, or the
No, it's
power.
population control.
Yeah,
For
it's
sure, for sure.
population
About
We
control,
know that
population
it's
but the population control is for their political target or goals. It's never about
benefits.
you. Yeah, it's no and never about women's rights. So please don't let China government or Chinese any officials to lecture for you Americans. It's never about the human right. Okay.
It's
they
rather.
they, uh, they now they now have a 3-child policy. But the interesting thing has been what happened with this 1-child policy. With as so many girls were killed, there was an imbalance in the gender population, and it created a group of males, in that the dangerous age is considered to be 15 to 24, right? So boys that are, and young men who are not in don't have a connection with society, right? Aren't like centered in society for some reason, and so they didn't have mates. There weren't enough women for these boys. And so apparently this was the Bear Branches thing, as I understand it, and that they apparently said that these boys were forming gangs and becoming very violent. And so having an imbalance favoring one gender fundamentally, it harms the fabric of that society. There's just there isn't a way around it. You need both. Like you need both, man.
Yeah. So like in some like the rural area, rural countries, like still the little girl from some cities. So you won't hear that. But last month or in April, there was a big news about a woman who were locked under. In a home, and they just tried to compare the photos and found she was stolen many years ago, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, from Sichuan, one of the province. And the government just denied it because so many girls were stolen to those suburban area, to rural area, for men to to let them have sex, you can say that in a way, and continue to give birth to new babies. This kind of things, even the Chinese government know it, they allow that silently. So again, not about human right, woman's right. It's all
Let,
about
let me let me add this card on the table. BBC News headline: China forcing birth control on Uyghurs to suppress population. Here's Guardian. The Chinese government is trying to rebrand forced sterilization as feminism. AP News. China cuts Uyghur births with IUDs, abortion, forced sterilization. So, the point being that if you're a minority in China, you're not Han Chinese, but you happen to be cursed with being born to Uyghur parents, you have forced sterilization, genocide. So, could somebody please help me untangle the cognitive dissonance level 5,000 that is going on from the Twitter account of China's foreign ministry in somehow assuming it has some moral superiority in lecturing anybody on the issues of human rights or women's rights when they're doing forced sterilizations, have a history of forced abortions on their own people.
Gee, it's fun to be a woman these days.
Well,
Actually,
China's
I don't
doing.
know. Sorry, hang on. I don't actually think that they think the Uyghurs are their own people. That's why they can do that. Tyler?
Yeah, in a sense, you can say that. But they are trying to transform Uyghurs into Han.
They're trying to convert them into being Han by forcing
Yeah.
them to abandon their own language and learn Mandarin, and forcing the men into camps and then replacing their husbands with Han Chinese men into the Xinjiang province to give Han names and blood to the region. So
Exactly.
they're doing incredibly effective genocide and just to wipe out the Uyghurs. And forced sterilizations are a big part of that campaign. There's no two ways about that. So how do you have a position of state-mandated forced sterilizations on part of your population? Make no mistake, they consider them part of their population. So my terminology, I think, is correct in saying they have forced sterilization on part of their population. It happens to be the ethnic non-Hans, which happen to be Uyghurs in this case I'm describing. But how is that in any way congruent with lecturing anybody about women's reproductive rights? That is just I'm trying to think about more egregious examples of abusing women's reproductive rights than forced abortions and forced sterilizations.
Well, it's kind of strange because China has a falling birth rate for its native population, the Han people, whereas the Muslim population actually has an exploding birth rate. So even in the sense of family planning, you're kind of prejudiced in your application of your policy to the minority, and that's the glaring thing right there, the obvious kind of contradiction. So it's strange that they would come out swinging with that perspective.
So
Well,
Chinese don't
because the Uyghurs
care.
were considered sort of terrorists at one point in time, and they started the oppression thing there. But currently, it's really about the fact that, yes, they're sort of included in the Chinese population if they agree with the CCP. And if they don't, they can be terminated or they can be forcibly aborted or whatever. And then the Han Chinese male. Um, is allowed to impregnate these women, and henceforth they become increasingly more and more Han Chinese, and it's all about population management and control.
Yeah,
So,
sorry,
in go ahead.
I mean, yeah, again, the control is for to consolidate the central power. Is not about human rights.
Yes. So China does not care about any human right, male or female. The Uyghurs, the males, are also forced into those camps and facing that horrible conversion techniques, such psychological, traumatic, just horrendous. So they don't care about Uyghurs. They don't even care about their own population. The way the workers' rights are, zero. On the other hand, I'm just flabbergasted on how much China is doing to improve this humanity, their own population, what they are doing to them, and overall for the world. They recently, excelled in their coal consumption, getting coal from Russia on cheaper prices, just disregarding all the environmental concerns. So the news just came out, how much coal they are starting to use now, even more than before. So they don't care about your life, they don't care about the air or environment, and I don't know how they can just go out and speak and lecture about any of the rights.
So the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson responded to NATO that NATO should stop trying to launch a new Cold War and stop trying to mess up Asia and the world after messing up Europe. What they should do is give up their Cold War mindset, zero-sum games, and stop doing things that create enemies. Like invading your neighbor country, which China is, you know, uh, supporting in the back channels. Um, Interesting. Very interesting.
Aren't Chinese invading Indian borderline areas and forcing or
No,
moving their population
please, please,
gradually and
please
buying
don't get me
land?
started on Tibet. Please don't get me started on Tibet.
But that's different, Aram. That's different.
Yes,
China
completely
attacking
different.
India is different. It's,
That's
They're not attacking each other. They're like breakdance fighting at the border because they're not allowed to use any arms. So they're literally just like kung fu fighting to the death there.
They're just slowly building houses and creeping their population inwards gently. There's no attacking involved.
Okay. So
what happened
Yep.
to human rights and common sense and and love thy neighbor as thyself. And I don't know, this is a bad morning for me.
Yeah, the problem is that this is the cheapest approach you can have warfare, is to just rape everyone and get your genes out there. It's very more demoralizing and cheaper than using bullets. And since they are putting also so much money into different developing countries, they also we see a rise in the strategy in developing countries that have conflicts with different ethnicities in their population, just using this type of rape and genetic approach to form the population instead of having war, which creates way too much mess
Do you know
and
what is, Dr. Francine? Sorry,
it,
sir. It's the Middle Ages.
it's actually considered genocide now. If you the attack where you rape women with the purpose of creating genetic pools that are more diluted is considered a form of genocide. That's after, I mean, a recent war, the Yugoslavian breakup, right? Wait, was that was the Bosnian War? That one. So that's because it was so widespread, they considered it now a form of genocide. It was like a war crime, but wasn't considered genocide. Now it is.
Okay.
Yeah, but the increase of that method now in African countries and so on, and it's quite shocking. There's a good one photographer, this very famous one that takes pictures of all kinds of world leaders and so on. He like supports this initiative to like uncover this and bring this to to awareness.
Okay, one last non-tech news before we get into it. Xi Jinping is in Hong Kong, ostensibly.
Yes, because tomorrow is the 25th year of Hong Kong's return to China's rule. So
Right.
Xi
So,
Jinping, yeah, the first time since the pandemic, uh, Xi Jinping left the mainland China. If we consider Hong Kong is not part of mainland China.
yep, and I mean it's hugely significant from a power perspective that he is in Hong Kong there.
And
It
even
kind
the day before the actual handover on the 1st of July. So already they preempted the 50 years, one, two nations, one, whatever it's called again, and preempted it by taking Hong Kong more under control 2 years ago. And now, one day before the actual thing with the 25, they're still doing it, taking control more and more, but before the time. So 25 years short, and we're still going strong with China asserting power.
yeah. To
It's the
Singapore.
mark.
Yeah,
Sorry,
you're
mark is significant because originally Chinese government promised 50 years, so 25, just half of the promised years, they turn over everything. These so-called two areas, one, and yeah, it's one China, two policy. This thing is totally gone.
so the tech news now that we're going to jump into. Let me get. Hold on, someone's got a hot mic there and a dancing dog on the kitchen floor there. Let me get the air
Air
horn.
horn.
There it is. Here we go. Hold on tight. Here's your top headlines for June 30th. The top story today comes from CoinDesk, which says they have sources that digital asset trading firm Genesis, which I believe is the Winklevoss twins, is potentially facing hundreds of millions of dollars in losses, partly through exposure to 3AC and Babel Finance. The DCG-owned trading colossus is said to have suffered nine-figure losses, partly through exposure to Three Arrows Capital, 3AC, and Babel Finance. And because Three Arrows Capital was sort of just forced to dissolve, I believe by a court yesterday, everyone who's backing that obviously is going to have to pay the piper on that one, and that's the claim that Genesis is going to have to pay the piper on that one. So the next
Yeah.
one.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Genesis isn't Winklevoss or Gemini.
Oh,
Genesis
sorry, you're
is
right.
one of the
Thank you.
what?
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, and Genesis is one of the DCG companies that I think is related to Brock Pierce, and the 3AC I believe was actually forced into bankruptcy because it defaulted on a loan. So and that is exposure to, well, several things, right? But a huge amount of it was so I believe was Celsius. So but there are more of these coming. This is not, the last one. There's a lot of asymmetric business plans, and this is why if you do any investing in anything, crypto or otherwise, you need to understand the model before. Don't just trust someone's name attached to it. The three largest failures we've had right now have all had A16Z involved, and they're not commenting on things. So just make sure that you personally understand and follow that model. It makes sense to you. If it doesn't, then no matter who's attached, you don't know why they're investing. So make sure that you're, stay clear, be safe, right? Don't invest in something just because someone says it was a good idea or because you see a big name behind it.
Okay,
Wasn't it a
next.
year ago we had our friend Brock in the channel? And we had
Yeah,
this separate session with him.
yes. And that was on, I'm trying to remember what the point of that was.
I
He's
think
on here regular. I mean, he's on here sometimes now. Roger Ver and Brock Pierce both follow me. I'm not sure what that means about me, but Roger Ver's been in the news recently too. So there's a lot happening with some old school people, but this is also what happens when a market declines. Like the people who are in earliest are the ones who hold the most assets, right? So they are the ones who are like the last strongholds for revitalizing the economy, especially in crypto. The problem in the past, and I make no direct accusations, but the problem in the past has been in order to revive a bear market, a lot of front running and wash trading has historically been the method that people have used in order to bring interest in prices back up. That market manipulation is much more scrutinized now. So right now we see, and of course, we have a completely different group of people and regulatory structure. And so the thing that we're seeing right now is the old guard who had a distinct method for increasing interest in pricing no longer have that method acceptable, and so they're trying other methods now to restore what they used to do in a method that is illegal. So anyway, that's why we see a lot of them coming back now.
Okay. So I was just checking out, Brock is an old friend, and I pinged him into the room when he came in last time, and I just can't remember why we pinged him in. I remember he was in a headline, and I thought, well, let's hear his side of the story. And he kindly jumped in and told his side of the story, and as usual, it made the journalist look inept and almost deceitful, as is quite common when you get the people involved in the stories telling their own sides of things. But so that wasn't much of a surprise. But I don't remember what that headline was even about, strangely.
Was it related to El Salvador?
Yes, I think it was about El Salvador.
Yep.
It rings a bell. It might be that we discussed this with a country switching over. Yeah, it rings a familiar bell.
Right. I think it was right in the middle of that whole El Salvador thing, and he was just there meeting with the president. Like, I think that was the issue, that El Salvador was rumored to be legalizing it that day, and it was official or whatever. And I had seen a photo of Brock the day before with the president. Got him in to tell the story from his perspective or something. Anyway,
Yeah, he was
so
sitting at the lounge when we spoke with him because he was still traveling and was going somewhere else. He had
right,
been there,
that's right.
so it
He
was.
was in an airport lounge. That's right, in Miami, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly. Yeah, yeah, because he was
He's
heading
done
back.
an enormous amount to bring awareness to crypto in general, like a
Yeah,
huge amount.
yeah,
Run political campaigns that he knew he wasn't even planning on winning, but putting out a ton of money to
yeah.
get people interested. There is
He
something to be said about that.
he got.
That he
I personally, my whole I did. He was the first person to tell me about Bitcoin. It was under $200 at the time, and he convinced me that the smart move is to put 1% of your net worth in it, and it will either go. His exact words were, "It'll either go to 50,000 or zero." And so you want to have 1% of your net worth in it, just as an asset class, and blah blah blah. And he made a very good argument for that. So, but it still sticks in my head the 50,000 as if like that was going to be the top end of it. And strangely, it did go to 60,000, and then quickly you
It
went.
went to 70. It went to
Yeah,
70. I remember on Clubhouse the rooms that were running like, we think Bitcoin's going to hit 35, and people were like, "That's crazy." And then it was like moved right past it. The one person that's like a real OG that we don't ever hear about, and I wish we did. Brock's wife Crystal is very smart, and she does a lot of work with a lot of different companies behind the scenes. So I'm just doing a little shout out for somebody who is. There are a lot of women involved. People say there's too many men in this
Oh, we
space.
have more. All right.
Tons of women involved, and people. She does a lot to promote women. She's somebody that I wish we heard more about.
A funny story, I bought Bitcoin for $80 and later used it to buy a pizza, and I regret it.
Okay, so the next big story, well, it's actually a sister story to the first story, which is, according to sources, FTX walked away from a deal with Celsius after finding the crypto lender has a $2 billion hole in its balance sheet.
This whole story is so interesting. Anything Sam Bankman-Fried gets involved with is like de facto, like it's at least entertaining to read because that guy has like, no holds barred. I do wonder if he said that he was interested in entertaining an offer with Celsius just because he wanted to be able to get a closer look at the books. But and I cannot imagine who let him do that and didn't include a confidentiality clause and a non-disparagement or what. Like, what lawyers are involved in this, I don't even know. But the ability of him to look at something and say something, like Viva wasn't allowed to say anything when they were looking at Enron, but he's able to talk about this stuff, and it might be just because he doesn't care what other people think, but he says like the number of exchanges that are insolvent, much less applications, are extremely high. So we're just going to keep seeing them go down. But he's like naming names. He's anybody, even if you don't care about crypto at all, he is so interesting to follow and read because he doesn't care. It's awesome.
Okay, next up is
Yeah, he doesn't care. He admits that it's all BS.
the next one is from TechCrunch that OpenSea tells its customers that an OpenSea employee, that an employee at their email vendor, which is customer.io, downloaded and sent email details to an external party, impacting almost all of OpenSea's users. So again, OpenSea, the popular NFT marketplace that hit a $13 billion valuation back in January, is warning its users of an email phishing issue after a data breach by their email vendor, customer.io, a rogue employee at their email vendor.
So what I want to see is someone have a loss related to this because now they've been sued. They are being sued for other things like, basically they've taken 230 to the like extreme outer limit. And this is the most important thing about the platforms. They're not insured. So they tell you where to put your digital assets. They tell you, how, like what type of security is going to be on it. You don't control it. They do. But if something like this happens, they don't have insurance for breaches, for IP breaks, things like anything like that happens. They don't have any insurance for them. So if enough things happen and people actually proceed with lawsuits, this could break them fairly quickly, I think.
Okay. Samsung becomes the first to mass produce 3 nanometer chips, beating TSMC, who is obviously on the brink of releasing a 3 nanometer chip, touting 45% lower power usage. That's huge. Compared to 5 nanometer chips and a 16% smaller surface area and other benefits. But the power saving benefits is tremendous. 45% less power usage is tremendous. So the next is Apple says that South Korean app developers can now use external payment methods because the South Korean court or government or whatnot ruled that that's the law of the land in South Korea, that Apple can't force themselves as the exclusive payment gateway between users and apps. And now Apple's saying that app developers can use external payment methods from the following: KPC, Initius, Toss, and Nice, as if those are like somehow approved by Apple or something, which totally defeats the whole premise that people should have their own choice of who they use. But the app developers will have to submit a new version of their apps, and it will reduce their fees by 4%, which seems a little strange until you dig a little deeper and you realize they should save way more because they were paying Apple 30%. When a payment gateway like Stripe or even PayPal will charge somewhere around 4%, maybe 5%. So you should see a savings of somewhere around 25% if you're changing to an alternative payment system. So why are your fees only reduced by 4%? Well, because Apple's saying, oh, well, we're still going to take a commission because we've partnered with these payment gateways, KCP, Initius, Toss, and Nice. They'll happily take your payments, but somehow magically they're going to be charging you 26%. The question that the journalists should be jumping all over is interviewing those payment gateways and finding out how much money they're kicking back to Apple. I guarantee you they're kicking them back somewhere in the neighborhood of 16, 17, 18%. And by the way, the easiest prediction in the world is South Koreans you're going to see a headline 2 weeks from now, and South Korea is going to say, that's bullshit. That's not what we meant when we said that app developers need to have alternative payment gateways. What we meant is, you can't force yourself into this transaction, period. That was the spirit of the law. And Apple's just playing games as usual because it's such a lucrative thing. It's billions and billions of dollars per year, and they're going to continue to play games until there's actual punishments and fines that are big enough to discourage them from gaining billions of dollars. So the fines are going to have to be in the ballpark of billions of dollars. So they're going to have to come up with a fine that is based on a percentage of their revenues on a global basis, which from time to time you do see rulings like that, where it's like the punishment is 4% of your global revenue or whatever. They're going to have to do something in that ballpark to force Apple to play straight, or they're going to have a severe consequence or loss attached to this ridiculous behavior, this crazy, hide the weasel game that they're playing with the South Koreans at the moment. So the next one is that Unity lays off over 200 people, which is about 4% of their workforce, which is regrettable. But as I mentioned nearly every day over the past several weeks, a rather pointless article, because every top-tier VC firm is softly demanding that their portfolio companies do exactly this, that this is the time. This is the perfect situation to cut your weakest team members. And now you have a green light to do it. If you were to do it at another time, there would be substantial press around it and everyone would be concerned and whatnot. If you do it right now, it'll be a headline for 5 minutes and no one will care because everyone's doing it right now. So do it right now, because every company has a small single-digit percentage of their team members should have been let go a while ago, but they don't for fear of negative press. Well, now is your golden opportunity to do it. So I don't fault any company right now for laying off 4% of their workforce, especially if they haven't really let any substantial numbers of them go over many, many years. You're going to have underperformers of some degree. So anyway, the next article is from Bloomberg that Bitcoin is on track for its worst quarter since Q3 2011, dropping 56% after falling as much as 4.4% to just above 19,000 on Thursday. And Bloomberg has another article, it says, as cryptos tumble, the average price of NVIDIA's GeForce 3080 video card on eBay dropped from $1,140 on April 30th to $710 on June 27th. And the reason for that is because
The miners aren't making any money.
correct, no one's interested in mining anymore. And that was the preferred card for doing crypto mining. And now it doesn't make sense to be doing crypto mining when these currencies are worth half of what they were a few months ago. So there's much less incentive to do it anyways. So you have a much less demand for this product, and so that the bubble, the kind of artificial bubble, due to somewhat artificial temporary demand for that particular product, has now popped, and so that's the short story there. The next one is that MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, purchases another 480 bitcoins at the $20,000 average price point, bringing its total holdings to about 130,000 bitcoins, which they've spent a total of about 4 billion on,
This
averaging
is
price of about
sorry.
30,000.
Tyler, I just wanted to make sure that people don't connect the GPU price drop with Bitcoin's hash rate. Bitcoin doesn't use GPUs, and Bitcoin's hash rate is roughly as high as it's ever been. It's only slightly off its all-time highs. So very different in kind to the others.
Well, explain why the strong hash rate is a metric that is of concern in evaluating
So
the strength of Bitcoin.
So if you're a professional miner, you know Bitcoin, and you've got millions of dollars of infrastructure on the line, and you are continuing to spend a huge amount of fiat money on electricity to mine Bitcoin, then why are you doing that? They can't pay their electricity bills by selling it back to dollars, or they're just about at break even at these prices. But it's interesting that they still continue to decide to mine Bitcoin. So take from it what you will, but the fact is that they continue to mine at levels that are very close to the all-time highs. I could tweet out a graph where you just Google for Bitcoin hash rate, and then you look at something like blockchain.com, and you can see the historical graph. I mean, we hit slightly higher highs than this, but if you look over like a 1 year time horizon, it's pretty interesting. I'll tweet that out now just so people can see it.
In summary,
I think that Bitcoin is the one that people think is going to come back. The other, DeFi, what the Bitcoin maxis call shitcoins, a lot of them are embroiled in being securities and in Ponzi schemes, but Bitcoin isn't that. So that's going to make it a little different.
Not wanting to get into a maxi versus any other thing. Bitcoin is likely to rebound, but so are other coins. They're not all scams. Like some of them are, and they should fall. And most of DeFi is not even close to what DeFi was intended to be. It is, it's basically, a lot of those are just Ponzi schemes, which is what Sam Bankman-Fried pointed out a while ago with his magic box theory. But it is true that, I mean, even if miners stop mining, remember what happened with China when like half of the miners were offline. And the only way that you noticed a difference in transaction speed is if you looked it up. There was almost no lag. It's an incredible system, honestly. But if you're moving to the Michael Saylor thing, this is actually a huge problem. And this has nothing to do with Bitcoin itself. I just want to emphasize that people get very confused about what I'm talking about. But let's say instead of investing in Bitcoin, he is investing in the Mexican peso, right? Or like, a burro farm somewhere, right? He has more money in Bitcoin than he does in his in the software operations and the money invested in the company in its traditional operations. It looks like it's fundamentally a change of control that requires a shareholder vote. Even if you are the majority shareholder, there's still a process that has to happen that hasn't happened, and he has actively, he's been proud of the fact that he hasn't he's like forced his directors to do things. He's part of a public company as CEO, and then there are the independent directors that he has to have, and the CFO all have potential criminal liability if they're not following these rules. This is post Sarbanes world. So this is something that I think is really important. If you are changing your business or you are deciding to put a lot of your liquid assets into another asset and you haven't gotten a shareholder approval and you haven't formally filed that you have changed your business, all of these things matter. It matters that you follow the rules because people are putting money into your business and you can't change the terms on them without giving them a say. Now, even if they all voted no and he was the majority shareholder, there is a process for how you handle that. You can still do what you want to do, but there is a specific process. What I don't like is seeing people applaud him for essentially being a really negligent CEO. And whether or not his investment decisions are good or bad is irrelevant. The point is that he's putting money that is part of the company in something without the proper decision making that has occurred. And he's also doing a lot of margin loans, which means he can potentially lose not just the asset he shifted cash into, but also he loses the underlying asset he purchased, which is the Bitcoin with the calls, right? So I don't know who's loaning him money. That hasn't been disclosed. And I don't know how he's continuing to make these purchases, much less go past that margin call that he said existed at 21. Then he said it was at 13, and now he's saying it's at 3. But someone's giving him money. He said we have access to funds. I don't know who that person is, but that is a material item that has to be disclosed to the public and to the shareholders. So just this is something that I would really like people to keep in mind, is that you can't just do what you want with your company when you have other people's money involved. Even if it's a private company and it's not a public company, there are still rules.
So,
China Sovereign
Alexandra,
Wealth Fund.
Alexandra, you and I have debated this before, so I just want to, this issue, because I was on the board of a public company, it's like 20 years ago, and without getting into all the nonsense, we ended up with a lot of cash on the balance sheet, where cash was a really significant asset, and it was a company in transition. It was a company that I had helped take out of a bankruptcy proceeding when I was one of the bondholders. And we were advised by our lawyers, the big issue, okay? We never went for a shareholder vote for anything, by the way. We were advised that we had to be very careful, and we were very careful to be very specific in our filings, that we were not going to we were not intending to be an investment company under the Investment Company Act, and that cash eventually would be deployed. In our cash position was a temporary situation, and we didn't go out and buy gold with it or anything. But we did change the kind of the direction of the company a bit. When I got it, it was mostly a hardware and software company that had basically failed, but it had a good servicing business. So we basically transitioned the company to do not just servicing on our legacy assets, but doing servicing on third party, for third party stuff that we didn't even develop. And so so you can argue that we changed the company from a
But yeah,
manufacturer.
but wait, post bankruptcy is a very different scheme. Very different scheme. Actually, even pre bankruptcy is a different scheme. You're
Okay.
just looking at a different world. That's not the same as this.
What do you think? You think the bankruptcy code has an exception for this? We didn't even think so. If we had just taken that cash and continually invested it, okay, in whatever, and we'll go from gold to silver to copper to Microsoft stock or something. I mean, then we would have been an investment company. So we had to be very careful that we didn't become an investment company versus an operating company. That was the key distinction, by the way. Are we an operating company operating any kind of a business versus being an investment company like a mutual fund?
I understand the difference between 40 Act and non 40 Act companies.
Okay.
I'm also saying that that is a distinction, but also the main part is that you were dealing with bankruptcy stuff is a very different issue. So
I mean, I've
these are
seen
just
that happen several times. I don't know what the law is. I'm not familiar with it, but I mean, I've had quite a few blockchain and supply chain companies that have changed their business model without any shareholder approval. I mean, I've got a blockchain company that went into gaming, changed the whole model, and it's still called Blockchain Inc. or something in Canada. I don't think it's worth anything, but it happens all the time. So if there's a law about it, I'm not
In
sure
the
if you.
U.S., not Canadian,
Yeah, this is U.S.
right? Not Canadian law. This is a U.S. law. It's specific to states particularly, but it
He
is a
said
U.S.
U.S.
securities
He said
Right,
it
law.
but
was
it
U.S.
is it is U.S. Remember, these are U.S. securities. So if you're saying it's part of Sarbanes-Oxley, I'm not
Post
familiar with it.
Sarbanes, yeah, it's post.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and it,
Okay.
no, the change of control and change of business, and this is definitely a discussion better suited to a legal room about this. But that is one of the main requirements that requires approval, and it should be in all the shareholders agreements and things like that. Just because people are doing it doesn't mean they're doing it correctly. If you looked at a blockchain company and said, well, that company did it and used that as your standard, we would have, and it was an appropriate standard, then we would have a much stronger industry right now. The problem is people take a lot of these rules based on other people's operating companies, and this is the same thing as looking at somebody and saying, well, that person invested, therefore they must have done due diligence and looked at it. None of them are. Very few of them are. The other thing is that they're also using lawyers who are not familiar with this area, and that is a very common thing. That's a whole other subject that I've talked about more than extensively, about problems with understanding expertise. That's a human problem. If you're outside, if it's not your area of expertise, it's a very difficult thing.
I guess
But these are
considering
rules that
how
exist.
litigious we are, and sorry for the background noise, but considering how litigious we are, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I earned Tesla stock early on, and I was a little bit shocked when he reported that he made more profits in Bitcoin than he did in cars in a filing, and I'm like, well, when did we become a Bitcoin investment firm?
That is the other thing, and that is actually the reason why he couldn't. Why, if you're talking about Elon Musk, I'm sorry, I think I'm have a lag. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Alexander, are you saying this was only because of Sarbanes-Oxley? Because that would make some sense, because everything I spoke to about and everything I've seen, where companies have changed like that, changed businesses, where it was pre-Sarbanes-Oxley. So you're saying it's only post-Sarbanes-Oxley this is a rule?
Well, the rule existed, but it didn't have the penalties it has now. It never. It was one of the requirements that you had in reporting, but it didn't have the criminal liability that you could have
Oh,
now.
reporting is one thing. Oh, we always, that's, by the way, yeah. With disclosure, we were always good, really, really good. We always made sure
That
that we had our disclosures and our 10Ks and stuff. Yeah, yeah. We always had disclosure.
that's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, next up is Grayscale Investments sues the U.S. SEC after the SEC rejected Grayscale's application on Wednesday to convert its flagship trust product to an NFT, to an ETF. Sorry. Um, okay, that's kind of the American way. And the next is from the New York Times. Amazon documents show that Amazon will restrict items and search results related to LGBTQ people and issues in the United Arab Emirates after the Emirati government threatened penalties. So sales of items including flags and books were blocked in the UAE, where homosexuality is criminalized. Okay. Uh, wouldn't the same be true of Google then? And every other big tech company, Netflix, etc., etc. Almost certainly. So why is the New York Times kind of picking out Amazon as unique in a way that it certainly isn't?
Probably because Amazon's selling actual products. I mean, Netflix should be dealing maybe with content, and Google really. I don't think people really view Google as a place that they buy things from, even though some people can. They just view it as a search engine. So, but Amazon, they're selling products. I mean, that's
It's a
so
search engine for products. But the point is if a country has criminalized homosexuality, that's more of the story. Every tech company that operates there is going to have to comply or go home, and Amazon's complying because
this
they.
is not new. This is not new. This is not new in the UAE. It's not like they just
Oh, I know.
criminalized it. It's
I,
always
I,
been
I don't
criminalized.
think it. I'm not saying that it is. What's new is that the New York Times, the Guardian, the Verge, and Gadget, and BBC are all jumping on this particular story that Amazon is complying with the government's anti homosexuality. But why not make it a broader story about how tech companies comply with governments everywhere, all the time, on all kinds of issues? India, most notably, regularly. Historically, China, then Russia, then India. Now, of course, this is just an obvious thing to us because we read all the headlines every day. But I find it peculiar that they're picking out Amazon in some way, pointing them out.
Because there was a specific action in a specific situation, so that's why they're reporting on it. They didn't just get up in the morning, which is I think where you're going, and said, let's pick on Amazon versus picking on Google. Something actually happened where involving Amazon with a government decision, last week or whatever. So there was a specific situation. That's what they're reporting on. They're reporting on a specific news item. They just
Just,
didn't wake up. Okay. Yeah.
I think they all just realized at the same time. Well, let's read the story a little bit just to deconstruct what's going on here. It says Amazon restricts LGBTQ products in United Arab Emirates. Sales and items include flags and books were blocked in the country where homosexuality is criminalized. Amazon moved to restrict items and search results related to LGBTQ people and issues on its website in the UAE on Monday after receiving pressure from the government there, according to company documents viewed by the New York Times. Okay, so from that, I'm imagining a potential scenario where Amazon received that letter from the UAE. They know very well that they're going to comply with that. They don't necessarily want to comply with that, but they want to share it with the New York Times. They want to show the New York Times, hey, it's not our idea to stop promoting LGBTQ products in the UAE. This letter was sent from above. We're just letting you know that who the real bad person is in this scenario. We're just complying so that we can, because we're greedy bastards at the end of the day. And so there you go. And so the journalist then
Tyler,
takes.
if you read further in the article, it mentions Netflix. It mentions the other companies. You need to
Okay, good.
read the whole article.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. The Emirati government gave Amazon until Friday to comply under threat of penalties, the documents show. I would love to see that document. I would love to see the wording of that document. It was not clear what those penalties would be. Interesting. That's the kind of stuff I want to see. Homosexuality is criminalized in the Emirates, punishable by fines and imprisonment, according to the State Department. Amazon's restrictions on products in the Emiratis are indicative of the compromises that tech companies are willing to make to operate in restrictive countries. Yeah, basically all of the world's leading. I mean, this is of such a massive scale that it makes this story meaningless. Even when professing to be adamant about free expression in their own country. Right. Well, there's different rules, different laws in different countries. Did that just occur to the New York Times? Oh, this is
See, I'd be I'd be more interested to see what companies have not complied, or give us a list of the kinds
right.
of compromises these companies have had to make. Right, that would be a more interesting article.
Precisely. New York Times. Here's my challenge to you: write a story critical of the King of Thailand. I dare you. I challenge you. Who's the journalist here? Who's the journalist? Here, please. Karen Weiss. I challenge you, Karen. In fact, I will put $100,000 if you write an article critical of the King of Thailand. In any way, even subtly.
Laws do vary by nation, indeed.
But she's such a big proponent of freedom of speech. I thought you were for free speech, Karen. What happened? All of a sudden, the cat's got your tongue when it comes to the King of Thailand. What happened, Karen? You have so much moral authority over Amazon. What happened to you all of a sudden? Why crickets all of a sudden when it comes to this fantastic, beautiful, handsome, brilliant king of Thailand? What's the problem? Why can't you say anything negative, Karen?
Who is the king of Thailand?
So
You can't say anything negative until you know who that person is and you know something about them.
It's this bald American chap.
Well, I
Tyler,
think there's a law specifically against that. So, like,
I'm
people have
just
faced
saying,
bad penalty before.
I can easily put Karen in the exact same position she's putting Amazon.
Tyler, you want to give her the benefit of the doubt? She's just a reporter reporting on a story. There was a
Okay,
specific event that happened with Amazon. They got a letter, so they responded to the letter, and she's just reporting on it. She
right.
didn't get up and decide, let's do some 30,000 foot view on UAE's policies in this area. She's just reporting on a very specific event, and that's what reporters do.
Well, check it out. So the next paragraph says, after hearing from the Emiratis, Amazon had its restricted products team take steps to remove individual products listings, and a team that manages the company's search abilities hid the results from more than 150 keywords the documents show. So Amazon clearly fed this to the New York Times because she wouldn't know that unless they wanted her to know that, in detailing precisely what measures they took as a reaction to this communique they got from the UAE. Because she saw not only the letter from the UAE, she also knows how Amazon, what measures they took to respond to it, which means Amazon spoon-fed this to her. The question is, why did they spoon-feed it to her? And then what's she going to do about it? The next paragraph says, the targeted search terms range widely, blah, blah, blah. Several specific book titles were blocked. Quote, as a company, we remain committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we believe that the rights of LGBTQ people must be protected, says Amazon spokesperson. So I guess that rubbed this journalist the wrong way, that they found there's clear cognitive dissonance there to some degree, that you claim to be a supporter of LGBTQ rights, yet you're willing to kowtow to a country because you're greedy bastards. I mean, the headline should be, tech companies are greedy bastards.
Well, it is very true anyway. I mean, we all know that, right? I mean, all this big tech, that it doesn't matter, Twitter's problem in India or anything else, any company want to get billions of people in China, they will have to do what the regulations of that country ask them to do, or else they will have to leave and lose all that lucrative money thereafter. So it just is very true. It doesn't matter how much they say that they stand for this, they stand for that. You hardly find a company that really stands for their principle and walk out from all those big markets. I mean, that's what they do. That's what Twitter did in Nigeria. When they wanted to come back, the government said, well, no, guess what? You have to register, you have to have a representative, you have to have a legal entity that answers to our questions. And they did that because they want to have access to 250 million people, and then go from there to the market. Facebook had the same problem in Kenya. So I mean, we all know that they put their income and they have shareholders. That's what they do. But they try to also have their cake and eat it by saying that we stand for this. And sometimes when they get caught, they try to send something like this to a reporter to say that we had no choice.
Right. And interestingly, she is based in Seattle, to kind of add a little bit of potential extra context to why she might have been spoon-fed this. So, by the way, in the version that I'm reading, Ken, I don't see anything about Netflix. Maybe I read it a little too quickly.
No.
Oh, there it
Actually, the part that you read, it's actually the part you skipped over the word Netflix when they were talking about other companies having issues like that. It's in there.
In the very last
In the
sentence, it says Netflix has pulled shows in Saudi Arabia and censored scenes in Vietnam. Apple has stored customer data on Chinese servers despite privacy concerns, and Google removed an app for a Russian opposition leader last year after facing a threat of prosecution there. And so basically, they leave it till the very last sentence of the story to mention that all the tech companies are doing this in all the countries.
And by the
So
way, motion picture companies allow China to censor their movies all the time in order to get them into China. And
right,
sometimes they decide they don't want to censor them because depending on who's the director, producer,
right,
and they just don't play in China. But that
right.
happens all the time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, the bigger picture here is this happen. This is so common that it's not worth the ink it's printed on. So to acknowledge that fact as the last sentence of the entire piece, to me begs it kind of strains credulity and exposes this for the sort of clickbait that it is, because it's a non. They're trying to make a story out of a non-story, but they have to acknowledge it without so that they don't appear inept and ridiculous. They have to acknowledge that this is happening all the time, everywhere, and they do in literally the last sentence of the entire piece, with no hint that that's the case until that last sentence of the entire piece. Okay, well, that would have been nice to. What if you had just changed that around and used that very important context to the first paragraph and said, it's a very well-known thing that every tech company around the world is constantly kowtowing to regimes around the world to enter their markets. And today we see another example of that again with Amazon in UAE. Well, then there's no real story because this happens all the time. Right, exactly. You could not have put that last sentence anywhere else other than that last sentence, because that last sentence reveals that this is not a fucking story. Oh, geez. Okay. Sorry, I got a little hot there. So the next one is Apple's.
Tyler.
Yes.
Sorry, Tyler. I mean, it's not a story, but it is a story because at least even if we ever get down to the last line of the story, if any regular reader gets down to the last line of the story to read that bit, at least they would know. The chances are very minimal, but there's so many things as a world we have done and chosen to do, and therefore colluded because we didn't read to the bottom line with things that have happened. So, for instance, 2 weeks or so ago, there was an article in some newspaper or other that was talking about the rules, the law, this that the fossil
We're losing you.
have there's a legal clause, and maybe Alexandra will know about this, that as an investor in a company, you can sue the government for actually changing your policy and therefore diminishing my investment value. So me as a regular shareholder investor in something, I can sue the government for reducing my profit benefit at the end of the day because we've changed to renewable sources rather than fossil fuel. We went along that for decades. It's quite scary that if you don't know about these things, how can it be right that well, I know. Investors invest money and you expect to get a profit, but at some point in time, we need to have a principle by which we live that says that I'm not out there to make a fast buck if there is a different scenario that I need to be aware of. Thank you. That's just me ranting.
Okay. Next up is Apple's CarPlay, which was demoed at their WWDC annual conference a month ago, lets users navigate to a pump and buy gas straight from the dashboard of your car. From the convenience never ends. In the never-ending pursuit of convenience, you now can pay from your dashboard of your car. The next is from Bloomberg that Niantic, the makers of Pokemon Go, lay off 8% of their staff, around 85 to 90 people. As I said 20 minutes ago, the non-stories of all the big companies all laying off their weakest team members. There's actual documents from the investors to their portfolio companies. Not their weak companies, their strongest companies, all of their companies, indiscriminately. Lay off your weakest team members now, right now, all of us together. We're all going to do it simultaneously. Go, now. You can find those documents. You can publish those documents. I've seen one of those documents. So just share that. Just share that story. The big tech investors are telling all tech companies to lay off their weakest team members. End of story. Then you don't have to keep running that every company that does it. So the next is researchers detail sophisticated malware targeting various routers and taking over Windows and Mac OS and Linux devices in North America and Europe for about the past 2 years. Router stalking Zoorat is likely the work of a sophisticated nation state, researchers say, an unusually advanced hacking group called Zoorat was able to hack into all of your stuff. The next is from Bloomberg that the EU lawmakers provisionally agree on anti-laundering rules for crypto requiring verified customer identities for transfers between regulated digital wallets. Oh, here it comes. They want to know that here comes the taxes on the cryptos and everything else because they want to identify you and all of the transfers. Ben, take it away.
Sorry, mate, just with the kid. But this has been going on for a while, hasn't it? Well, I'm not sorry, I didn't quite hear the whole headline. I'm not sure what's new. The whole KYC thing has been with us for some time now. What am I
Well,
missing?
they're trying to now outlaw. I'm surmising here, but EU lawmakers provisionally agree on anti-laundering rules for crypto. They're trying to make it even harder to do any kind of laundering, and they want to make it harder for any of the enablers to anonymize any kind of activities. They're requiring verified customer identities for transfers between digital wallets. So if you want to be a digital wallet that receives anything, you must comply. We must know the identities. And if you don't, then you're on the bad guy list. And now the Interpol will come after your ass. And they want to make sure that there's no potential for anonymous crypto, essentially.
Okay, so it's possible to detect that. It's going to be really hard to enforce it. And what happens if this is virgin mined Bitcoin, for example? So you're a miner, you've mined it yourself, you haven't ever, you're not large enough operation to have to sign up with the local law enforcement or the council or anybody else and tell them who you are. So they're going to see some Bitcoin. They're not going to be able to trace back to the source. But for everything else, it's a strange thing to put in place to say that you can't make a digital wallet to digital wallet transfer without without submitting some paperwork to explain or keep an audit trail or basically identify yourself. It's a bit odd. It really only applies to places where that transaction can't be traced back to a KYC source. So for any Bitcoin transaction I would ever make, you'd be very clear, you'd trace it back, you'd see which registered exchange it was bought on. That exchange has like a passport and driving license, and it's very clear. But for people who had Bitcoin before the days of KYC or continue to mine it today at sufficiently small scale to go under the radar, then sure, it could help with traceability there. So I
So
don't, yeah.
Ben, so right now, right, whether you have a cold wallet or hot wallet, do you need to be registered? Does those wallet need to be registered to an identity?
No,
I
the
think what
wallet.
they are saying is you have to. If not, you'll be illegal.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect a lot of people will just ignore that, but it's not. What is detectable is the movement of Bitcoin on the public blockchain from one address to another address. That's the audit trail that gets left, and normally you can follow that all the way back to its source. But that's about all you can tell. You can tell other things in the meta by meta analytics, chain analytics, and so forth. It wouldn't. I mean, it personally wouldn't bother me if they said that you have to register. I'm quite surprised how little the taxman in the UK wants to know about like the holding of Bitcoin. They don't really care. They need you to keep quite a lot of records about your cost basis, what you bought, when, at what price, yada yada. But they're not really interested in it until you come to then liquidate it, and they're trying to determine whether there's a capital gain or not. So, yeah. Let's see what the actual letter of it is when it comes out and what they're actually asking you to do. There's going to be some serious practicality issues with it if it's like it sounds. But if you've got the article, I'll read it. And maybe the only problem with responding to these things so quickly is that there's no time to read the article. So the devil's in the detail, as Tyler just pointed out in the previous article. The clincher was at the bottom. So I'll have a read and come back if.
Cheryl already pinned it. I just pinned the Bloomberg version of it for your convenience there. The next one is from Wall Street Journal. Researchers say some businesses are exaggerating AI's capabilities, brewing misunderstanding and distorting policymakers' views of AI's power and fallibility. Google, Meta, and OpenAI are investing heavily in the technology, which is increasingly capturing the public imagination. And after years of companies emphasizing the potential of artificial intelligence, researchers say it is now time to reset expectations. With recent leaps in the technology, companies have developed more systems that can produce seemingly human-like conversations, poetry, and images, yet AI ethicists and researchers warn that some businesses are exaggerating the capabilities. Hype that they say is brewing widespread misunderstanding and distorting policymakers' views of the power and fallibility of such technologies. Quote, "We're out of balance," says Oren, a chief executive at the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, a Seattle-based research nonprofit. He and other researchers say the imbalance helps explain why many are swayed earlier this month when an engineer at Google argued, based on his religious beliefs, that one of the company's AI systems could be deemed sentient. In reality, AI encompasses a range of techniques that largely remain useful for a range of anyway. So I feel like they're trying to generate a story out of much of a non-story here. They do mention OpenAI's DALL-E system that generates images, and they give examples like McDonald's in orbit around Saturn, bears in sports gear in a triathlon. Google has since followed with its own system. Margaret Mitchell, who co-led Google's ethical AI team before the company fired her after she wrote a critical paper about the system, says part of the search giant's sell to shareholders is that they are the best in the world at AI. Miss Mitchell, now at an AI startup called Hugging Face, and Timnit Gebru, Google's other ethical AI co-lead, also forced out, were some of the earliest to caution about the dangers of the technology. Okay, well, I don't know that interviewing the people that got fired by Google's AI teams is the right people to be interviewing about. There's an interesting point that the AI companies are hyping their AI efforts because ultimately it's a recruitment race. There's a limited number of top talent, and they're all fighting for it. And they all want to create the impression that they are the place where all the other top talent is working. That's what's really going on. That's what's really driving this. That's what the race is all about. Because if you can continue to if you get to the top of that, if you are really perceived as where the top talent is working, you'll continue to get the pipeline of the top talent. And that is worth trillions of dollars with a T. So you can understand economically why they're doing this, why they're highly economically incentivized to do exactly this behavior. And maybe they are getting a little bit over their skis in terms of highlighting what where they are at with things. Why they don't mention this, I mean, that's the real essence, the real big context of what's going on here. It's rather simple, it's rather plain, but I don't know that makes for a good story. So, anyone else with a take on this particular headline? Okay, moving on. So the next one that I have here is Wired, that Section 230 is the last line of defense for online abortion speech, without which platforms could face legal liability for distributing abortion information. Oh, that's interesting. But thank God for Section 230. And thank God the platforms don't have to, aren't going to be forced to moderate that content. So it's the last line of defense for online abortion speech, yeah. And without Section 230, the big platforms could face legal liabilities, right? But they're not going to. That's the whole point. That's the whole beautiful premise of Section 230, that they are not, that they are platforms, not publishers, and that they will not be facing any liability for distributing abortion information. You might, as the sender of that information, They might illegalize that. They might come to you. You might have the FBI or the authorities knocking on your door saying, WTF, what the hell were you thinking? They might even make laws against it. But it'll be against you personally, not the platform. Because, again, it's not a national issue. This is a state-by-state issue. So in states where abortion will continue to be legal, it really won't make any difference. This will only be of any relative interest in the states where it becomes illegalized, which, of course, there will be many, unfortunately. But no doubt they will be watching social media and they'll be using analytical tools and databases not entirely dissimilar from what the CCP does in China about tracking who's saying what about things. And the question is, do we want authorities tracking social media for illegal activities? Well, of course we do if it's related to bombing of public places or terrorist activities, but probably not when it's related to people's, more personal decisions that are now deemed to be illegal in some areas. But it's going to happen. This is going to happen. There's going to be some state that takes it upon themselves to punish somebody for saying something, and they'll make it illegal to share this information. I'm curious which state will be the first to do it. And we will see a headline of somebody being arrested in, I don't know, Mississippi or Alabama for sharing information about abortions and whatnot, and the authorities here, watch out. I mean, that might even happen sooner than later. So the next is from The Intercept. They say they have documents that Coinbase is selling its intellectual gathering tool called Coinbase Tracer to ICE, letting the agency, ICE, track crypto transactions. Well, that's kind of exactly what I was just saying on the last article, that there are tools for government agencies to track user information. And here's Coinbase selling intelligence gathering tools to a government agency about its own users. By the way, there are other platforms. This is very common. Airbnb builds a tool for governments to track all the hosts, where they're at, how much money they're making, and if they're paying appropriate taxes. And that's why countries allow Airbnb, because it ends up being a net tax generator for the country that they previously weren't getting. And if countries used to worry that Airbnb is, the hotel lobbies, the hotel associations would go to the government and say, hey, you've got a whole bunch of people creating a black market of hospitality that competes with us, the hotels, and we're the ones funding your campaigns. Put an end to it. And they said, hey, Airbnb, you're not welcome in our town anymore, or our state anymore, or our country anymore. And Airbnb said, why is that? And they said, well, you've got a whole bunch of financial activity going on that's a bit unregulated. And Airbnb said, oh, well, what if we made it easy for you to transparently see all those transactions? And what if we even collected all of those taxes for you immediately and just sent them to you instantly? What's your bank account? And the government said, oh, shit, you can do that? Well, here, let me, hey, Sarah, can you turn on the coffee maker? Hey, would you like some tea and some biscuits here, sir? That sounds fantastic. How much money do you think, how much extra taxes do you think we could make here in California or wherever? By the way, this just happened in Thailand. So, well, it turns out we can give you, tens of millions of dollars in taxes. Why didn't you ask sooner? We could have done this for you earlier. So this is what's really going on with tech companies and governments, and it's just another an extension of that earlier story of complying with governments, as we were talking about with the New York Times and Netflix and Amazon in the UAE. So the next one's from Reuters. An investigation details an Indian hacking for hire scheme to obtain documents in legal cases, which started in 2013 and targeting more than 75 US and European organizations. A trove of thousands of emails records uncovered by Reuters reveal Indian cyber mercenaries hacking parties involved in lawsuits around the world. Okay, so it's information selling. The next from the Financial Times, an investigation details an operation by Chinese hacking group APT40 to lure graduates into spying and translating stolen documents using a front company. And this is the cutting edge of espionage. And what's happening is, and it's really gruesome, and the hopefully somebody will blow the lid off this before long. What you want to know what's really happening? I'll tell you what's really happening. What's really happening is China is, as NATO said earlier today, using cyber as in negative ways against the U.S. and its allies, and mainly for intellectual property theft. They're trying to steal company secrets of all kinds, schematics and everything, so they can build airplanes and everything. Everything. And now the latest version of this is hacking has gotten harder because companies are employing better security measures. The Israelis have built a whole lot of awesome security features that companies are now paying for, which makes the whole job of digital remote hacking a whole lot harder. However, China has come up with a very clever workaround, as it's called in the biz, which is they have a whole lot of graduate students and PhDs who are employed by a lot of the top companies all around the world. And they're now forcing those people to do corporate espionage and leak the passwords to the cyber hackers back in Beijing so they can infiltrate the networks. And if you don't, then your little grandma's going to disappear back home in Fujian. That's what's happening. That's actually happening at scale. So it's only a matter of time before the lid gets blown off of that, because it's known in the back channels, it's discussed in the back channels, and it's just a process of bubbling up to the right editor at the right publication. They're probably doing the background investigation on that as we speak, and building a massive story and trying to find the sources and blah 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 blah. Somebody will win a Pulitzer Prize when they blow the lid off that whole scenario. But that's what's going on. But I haven't yet seen anyone really blow the story off of that. But this one says, an investigation details an operation by Chinese hacking group APT40 to lure graduates into spying and translating stolen documents. It sounds like they're on the right track. I have not even read this story yet, but it's the Financial Times. But the degree, I'm curious the degree to which they are up to speed on what's really going on. It says Chinese university students have been lured to work at a secretive technology company that masked the true nature of their jobs, researching Western targets for spying and translating hacked documents as part of Beijing's industrial-scale intelligence regime. Well, they got that part right. The Financial Times has identified and contacted 140 potential translators, mostly recent graduates who have studied English at public universities. They had responded to job adverts at Hainan Jiangdan, a company that was located in the tropical southern island of Hainan. The application process includes translation tests on sensitive documents. So basically, the state is hiring a whole lot of translators to translate all of this stolen material that the hackers were able to get their hands on, because it's high-level information. So they need graduate levels with very high level of English ability. And so this company is alleged by a 2021 U.S. federal indictment to have been a cover for the Chinese hacking group APT40. Western intelligence agencies have accused APT40 of infiltrating government agencies, companies, and universities across the U.S., Canada, Europe, and the Middle East under the orders of China's Ministry of State Security. The FBI sought to disrupt the activities of the Hainan Jiangdan last July by indicting 3 state security officials in Hainan province for their alleged role in establishing the company as a front for state-backed espionage. Another man mentioned in the indictment is believed to be a hacker who helped supervise employees. Western intelligence services also seek out prospective spies from universities. Oh, there it is. With applicants undergoing rigorous vetting and training before joining the likes of the CIA in the US or the UK's GCHQ signals. So that, okay, well, this is interesting. I wasn't aware of this. So the CIA is saying, we know something is crazy is going on because we are getting lots of applicants from suspicious Chinese individuals who are applying to work at the CIA, and then we watch them very closely, and it's clear that they're spies for China and connected in this whole game of APT40 and the hackers. So if it's going on in the intelligence agencies, then you better be goddamn sure it's going on at Google and Facebook and everywhere else. Particularly Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, all of the military apparatus in the US. So yeah, they imply, but they don't say that. They only say that it's now known that it's happening in the intelligence agencies. But that's for sure it's happening at all the other companies, and they kind of softly brush over that point. But it's happening in huge scale. So anyway, interesting article. The next one that I have is an in-depth look at the 2016 Bitflex hacks and U.S. government case against some of the people involved. Who cares? The next Wall Street Journal says they have sources that Tencent and ByteDance, China's two biggest tech companies, and others plan layoffs impacting thousands after Chinese internet companies cut tens of thousands during regulatory crackdowns. The latest round of job cuts at Chinese tech giants come even as Beijing signals easing of its regulatory campaign against the sector. Next, Bloomberg says North Korea-backed hacking group called Lazarus might be behind Harmony's $100 million altcoin theft. The hack bore similarities to the $600 million Ronin Bridge attack. Suspected North Korean hackers, known as the Lazarus Group, are believed to be behind the recent $100 million heist of California blockchain Harmony. And it seems to be what's going on there. You're probably wondering, really? North Korea? Hackers? Yes, it's very well known that North Korea is responsible for some of the most advanced, sophisticated hacking schemes going on, and an obscene amount of crypto that they're able to acquire. And the question is, how did North Korea, a country that can barely tie its shoelaces, manage to hack into have such impressive cyber capabilities? Until you realize that it's basically China is very supportive of North Korea doing these activities, somewhat by proxy. Not so dissimilar from Ukraine's amazing abilities in fending off Russia. As we read yesterday, U.S. intelligence officials are on the ground in Kyiv, kind of holding one hand on the wheel. So you would be forgiven for assuming that Beijing has one hand on the wheel of Pyongyang's cyber activities. So I think that is all of the big boring headlines. Oh no, there's one about SenseTime. Financial Times says that Chinese AI startup SenseTime's shares dropped over 50%. That's the Chinese version of their facial recognition system, by the way. Iran's Me Too activists on Instagram are being targeted by 1 million bots in a coordinated harassment campaign using social media marketing firms in Pakistan. Anything else, Cheryl? No.
YouTube channel.
Which one?
You refresh the page 15 minutes
Okay.
ago. There's a new one.
A look at the media critics. Is that the New York Times one?
TechCrunch.
Okay, hold on. Let me refresh the page, as you said there. Here we go. Let me see. I don't see it. What does it say? Oh, YouTube says channels cannot hide subscriber counts starting June 29th to fight fake accounts, and rolls out an increased strictness comments moderation setting. Oh, that's cool. So if you're a YouTube channel, you can have stricter comment moderation turned on so that you remove ostensibly bots and bad behavior from your comments, or more spam filtering for the comments. Okay, that's cool. Alrighty, so now we go into the tweets. And the first tweet that I have here is where did it go? This one from Saudamini, from Toyota, about Toyota. If Toyota's cars can't keep their tires on, what good is a $35 billion electric vehicles pledge? And it's referring to the fact that Toyota had a problem recently with wheels coming off, and so they're raising the question, why should we take them seriously about their new $35 billion electric vehicle pledge if they can't keep the wheels on their cars? It's just clickbait, basically. Toyota probably has the best service record of vehicles in the history of transportation. So you're going to have to do better than that if you want to criticize the most dependable cars the world has ever known. So try again, I would say to that journalist. The next is, working from a tropical island is the new work from home trend, from Saudamini. Business leisure travelers are a growing breed, and tourist hotspots want their trade, which is true. Without even reading the article, Bali just this week passed a new 5-year visa for digital nomads, a tax-free digital nomad visa, by the way, which I wonder if they mentioned that. They don't. I just searched oh no, they do mention Bali here. David Abraham realized there was a market for his type of ultra-remote working while at his laptop at a Tokyo Starbucks. Oh boy, I wonder which one he was at. I used to work at many Tokyo Starbucks. When he noticed the customers around him were working too, he asked himself, why couldn't they be in an amazing place like Bali? Yeah, that's what I thought, and that's where I went. Abraham now runs Outpost, a company that provides temporary living, working spaces in Indonesia and Sri Lanka. Yeah, so there's a whole new short-term residential, what's more long-term residential. It's more like monthly residences in places like Bali and Thailand and whatever. And I get approached regularly to convert my resort into such a place. Quote, you don't want to just be hoping for the best when it comes to your visa status. You want to know what the rules are, colleague. So they kind of roll that in as an additional feature of making sure you have all of the visa situation is all easy peasy. So the next one is Bosch, the big German company, opens a massive smart campus in Bangalore in India. And it seems Mr. Modi did a remote appearance virtually at that event, which no doubt he would. And that's something that countries fight over constantly, is getting regional offices to open, which I kind of play a role in with Stockholm, and where we compete with all the other Nordic neighbors, particularly on tech company data centers. So did anyone else have a tweet since we met last time that they want to make sure we get into?
Here's a plug. We're going to do a room right now on sustainability, talking about power again. So be there or be square.
Oh, that's starting in 3 minutes. Okay, so I'll make it quick. So Saudamini found this one, that Google's self-driving firm, Waymo, will deliver goods. Did you hear that? Goods, like products, for Wayfair. Self-driving big rigs will soon be hauling Wayfair furniture, etc. As I told you would happen, the And I spelled it out several times many months ago, and here now it's finally happening, and we're starting to see the headlines in recent days. And let me really paint the picture super clearly. There's going to be a battle for autonomous vehicle networks that transport everything, including people and goods, simultaneously. So you'll hop into and there'll basically be just a handful of big players, because you're going to have to be an incredibly well-funded big player to play in this game, because it's one of the biggest games on the planet, which is the mobility of everything. So you're going to have Google's going to play in this. They already are. Amazon's going to play in this. They already are. And Amazon's moving a whole lot of products and goods. They're, as of yet, not really moving a lot of people. Google was moving people, and now they're going to get into moving goods. Uber was moving a lot of people, and they're moving a lot of food. But there's going to be partnerships between the places that sell goods, like Amazon, like Walmart, like Target, like Shopify. The places where people buy things are going to be power players in this game. Tesla is going to be a big player in this game because they have the autonomous vehicles. So the people who have the autonomous vehicles, the people who route and have the apps that control where people want to go, and then the people who sell the goods. And there's going to be alliances between them. And then you're going to have incredibly cheap, high utilization of autonomous vehicles transporting things everywhere all the time. And when you have a vehicle, a smart vehicle plugged into a supercomputer of AIs that can intelligently route in the most efficient way possible, in a way that no human can ever dream to do, everybody's orders from the past 10 minutes in a neighborhood, along with the people in that neighborhood, wherever they want to go, the cost of the delivery drops down to damn near nothing, especially when there's no human driver. By the way, it just occurred to me that you could ostensibly offer free rides to everybody in a city if they're willing to take their McDonald's order to the front door of the house next to the place that they're going. Because that would solve the last meter problem. Because the autonomous vehicles get you to the last mile, but they have difficulty servicing the last meter, and they're going to have to come up with other creative little robots and drones to get the package to your front door. But you could leverage the human transportation factor and give free rides to everybody in exchange for taking people's Happy Meals to their neighbors' homes, for example. So that I'd be interesting to see which company cooks that scheme first. But we'll have to wait. And let's hand it over to Ben, who's going to do another energy room here. Is it pinned to the top of the room? It is. Energy Sustainability Essentials. AC, DC, solar. Ooh, that's awesome. The nitty gritty of energy sustainability. Ben's going to do what Ben does best. He's going to break it down and make it really simple. And what a valuable service he's providing to Clubhouse in doing that. So kudos to Ben, and thank you to everybody for another Tech News Around the World.